Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
You came across an article there in the Tablet magazine, and it's on the very, very famous the Book of Kells.
Yes, well, it's known as Ireland's masterpiece. It's in the Tablet magazine, a magazine I receive every week.
When you say you receive it, do you mean you buy it, or is it free?
Well, I get it from a friend who gets it, and he gives it then to me when he's finished with it every week.
Is the Tablet magazine, is it available in the shops, or?
Well, it is available in some shops, but it's a magazine printed in London, but it also describes and matters affecting Ireland. It's both Britain and Ireland.
And it's a Catholic magazine.
It's a Catholic magazine.
Can you just show me the front of it?
Yes, there's the front of it.
Oh, okay, that's very good.
Tablet magazine, marvellous magazine.
Excellent.
Well worth reading, and some very good writers.
So we'll talk about the Book of Kells anyway, a thing of beauty, as you say.
A thing of beauty, a song of joy. The Book of Kells is Ireland's greatest cultural treasure and one of the world's most famous medieval manuscripts. But it also holds a mystery that takes time and patience to decipher. And this is by Fancha Ryan, a very able scholar who has written about this Book of Kells from another perspective, and I'll just read just some little bit about it. He says, at a conference dinner recently, a colleague, my historian colleague from Belgium, got very excited. The Book of Kells, from when I first heard about it in school, I have been fascinated by it ever since. It is beautiful. Now, undeniably, it is a thing of beauty, but it is so much more. It was produced by Irish monks around 800. It says CE, but I mean that's after Saviour. Probably on the island of Iona. It contains the text of the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, transcribed following mainly the Vulgate Latin text, and written in a beautiful style of calligraphy.
Calligraphy, yeah.
That's one word that I don't use.
I've done calligraphy before, yeah, go on, yeah.
That became known as the Irish hand. Today, the 340 vellum leaves, folios, we are missing about 30, are on permanent display in the Trinity College Library in Dublin, and it attracts a lot of visitors.
I think they actually turn one page per day. I think that's about
correct.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and you can buy. There was copies made of it. I think the cost a few €100, and there would have been collector's items. I think they sold out. This was done years ago. The very first folio in the extant manuscript comprises the final section of a guide to biblical proper names, chiefly Hebrew names, which was compiled by St. Jerome in the 4th century. Then, before we get to the Gospel text, we go through canon tables, concordance of Gospel passages compiled in the 4th century by Eusebius of Caesarea. Then the Brevis Causade, list of chapter contents, and finally the argumentative, which are the Gospel preface. All this tells us that the creators of this manuscript were well educated, literate in Latin, and at least somewhat in Hebrew, and in touch with learning in the rest of the Christian world. Now, this was in 800, so the Book of Kells, they would have been from Kells going to Iona. The Book of Kells might well be described as a song of joy, as the incarnation, a celebration of the good news of the birth of Christ. Now, isn't that good? And that's it, that's a little section of it there. And there's another lady on the opposite page, Melanie McDonough. She's actually Irish. and she's writes in the tablet. Her articles I always find very interesting and good. She has an angle that's quite good, and she's also a leader writer in the London Evening Standard, which is the London evening paper, and she would be a very important position. But she's a marvellous writer and gives an angle to things that I find very interesting. She's writing there about the Coptic the martyrs, especially those martyrs that was beheaded by the ISIS there from Libya. They were walking in Libya, and it was an awful gruesome text. So there's a book written about it, and she's talking about that. So that's the Treasure of Ireland, the Book of Kells, and I won't say much more except there are treasures. The famous Arda chalice is another marvellous example of the sort of treasures going back. That was produced 1,000 years ago. It's on display in the National Gallery, but there's other famous matters that we had. As a matter of fact, the first university in the world was established in Ireland. There was 12 scholars in what was called a university or a seat of learning somewhere in the Midlands. I had the privilege of visiting that place and being taken on a tour to where the students at that time, going back hundreds of years, were educated.
Very good. Thanks very much, John.
Thanks very much, Oliver.